Are you drowning in responsibilities? Discover why your drive to do it all could silently be destroying your mental health. And look at some science-backed strategies that can save you from burnout and anxiety and also chronic stress. Welcome again to Peace Unplugged. Before I start, I'm going to share with you a short testimony. I've had a fair few jobs in my working lifetime. It wasn't until I was about age 30 that I started to look at working seriously to build a career. I was pretty good at administration in the early days, and I managed to get myself a job in administration in the motor trade. It worked out well when I started, but gradually I took on more and more responsibility. That got to the point where work became like an addiction. Working long hours became very difficult to get out of, mainly because I got responsibilities of a mortgage and a young family. I made that classic mistake of working extra hours on a voluntary basis just to try and keep up. And to a large extent, that was in the vain hope I'd get a bit of a reward for it. I didn't want all that stress to beat me. In the end, unfortunately, it did beat me. You see, in our achievement-obsessed culture, taking responsibility in the workplace is quite often celebrated. We wear our busy schedules like a badge of honour. There is a hidden cost to trying to be that person that everybody else relies on, and it can turn into a mental health crisis, and that affects millions of high-performing workers and caregivers and overachievers worldwide. Today I'm going to look at the hidden dangers of shouldering too much responsibility in the workplace. As usual, this will be backed by some neuroscience and some clinical psychology research. These are the real-world consequences that you need to know about. So here's part one, the perfectionist paradox. Meet Barbara. She's a marketing director that volunteers for every project going. That's mentoring junior staff. She's the classic never saying no to her boss. She believes that taking on more responsibility demonstrates her value and believes it secures her position. After all, isn't that what successful people do? Within 18 months, Barbara developed chronic insomnia. She also experienced panic attacks and severe decision fatigue. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 2019, found that individuals who consistently overcommit experience a 47% increase in anxiety symptoms and a 35% higher risk of developing clinical depression compared to those who set healthy boundaries. That's Frost et al. 2019. So the neuroscience is clear. Chronic responsibility overload triggers persistent activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis. That floods the system with cortisol. This doesn't just feel bad. It actually has a negative rewiring of the brain. Research from Stanford University demonstrates that prolonged stress exposure shrinks the prefrontal cortex while enlarging the amygdala, comprising decision-making while amplifying fear responses. That's from Arnston, 2015. Barbara's breaking point came during a workplace meeting when she had a panic attack. It was only then that she decided to seek some therapy. She learned that her worth wasn't measured by her output. Setting boundaries wasn't a weakness, it was survival. The lesson? Our brain cannot survive perpetual stress by taking on massive responsibilities without it deteriorating. Now let's look at example number 2. This is the caregiver collapse. I'd like you now to meet Marcus. He's the primary caregiver for his aging mother, whilst at the same time he has a full-time job and he's also raising 2 teenagers. He told himself he could handle it. After all, this is family responsibility and it's non-negotiable. Caregiver burden is a documented medical condition. According to research in the American Journal of Public Health, family caregivers have a 63% higher mortality rate than non-caregivers, primarily due to stress-related illness. That's from Schultz and Beach, 1999. The condition is so severe, it has its own diagnostic criteria. The psychological toll shows up in many different ways. There is compassion fatigue. That is emotional numbness that occurs from the constant demands of caregiving. There is anticipatory grief. That's chronic anxiety about future loss. And there is identity erosion. That's kind of like a loss of self. A meta-analysis in the Gerontologist 2020 found that 40 to 70% of family caregivers show clinically significant depression symptoms, with 25% meeting criteria for major depressive disorders. That's from Pinkwart and Sorensen 2020. Marcus finally accepted respite care and he joined a support group. He learned that seeking help for himself wasn't abandoning his mother. he realised that it was essential that he looked after himself to be healthy enough to continue to care for his mother. Research shows that being a caregiver and sustaining that means that the responsibilities need to be distributed, and there needs to be some protocols put in place to ensure that happens. Let's now move on to a third example, the leadership trap. As a newly promoted team leader, Jessica believed that her success depended on her personally solving all the team problems. She handled the conflicts, she covered for underperformers, and she worked nights to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. She was being responsible, right? Wrong. This pattern represents hyper-responsibility. It also gets referred to that you become a control freak. Again, that's something I experienced. And it was quite hard to take. I was in full denial for quite a while for it. Research from the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology reveals that leaders who fail to delegate appropriately experience 58% higher rates of burnout, significantly impaired cognitive flexibility, reduced team performance and autonomy, and increased risk of executive dysfunction. Dr. Christine Maslach, work on burnout, identifies lack of control as a paradoxical factor. Leaders who try to control everything lose actual control over their well-being and effectiveness. Here's the irony. Taking on too much responsibility makes you less effective, particularly at handling responsibility. Neurological studies using fMRI imaging show that chronic decision-making under pressure depletes glucose in the prefrontal cortex. Yeah, that leads, and it makes even simple decisions really overwhelming. Jessica resolved her issues through some executive coaching. She learned that effective leadership means empowering others and not doing everything herself. Delegation isn't shirking responsibility. It's actually multiplying capacity. The result was her team actually improved performance when she learned to step back a little bit and delegate. Her stress scores dropped by 42%, and that was within 3 months. Now here's a fourth example. Financial responsibility and mental strain. Here you'll meet David. He became the primary breadwinner in the household after his partner lost her job. He also took on a second job in an attempt to maintain their lifestyle. He felt responsible. He felt it was non-negotiable because his family depended on him. Financial stress, combined with the work overload, makes things very psychologically toxic. Research published in Clinical Psychological Science found that financial worry combined with excessive work hours increases depression risk by 75%. And anxiety disorders by 82% compared to financial stress alone. That's from Sweet et al. 2018. A long study tracking 5,000 individuals over 10 years found that those working more than 55 hours a week had a 33% increase of stroke risk and 13% increase in coronary heart disease risk. That's the body literally breaking under the pressure. That's from Kivimaki et al. 2015. David's wake-up call was a minor heart episode when he was aged 38. Through some financial counselling, he discovered some cost-cutting strategies, and that allowed him to drop that second job. His whole family adjusted their lifestyle. David learned that his presence in the family and his health mattered more than maintaining appearances. As a result, his blood pressure normalised within 6 months. Now let's look at example number 5, digital age responsibility creep. As a remote worker, Priya found that her boundaries were dissolving. Morning meetings with European clients, evening calls with the Asian team, constant Slack messages, and the implicit expectation of being on call 24/7. Technology available suggested that she had flexibility, but it resulted in constant obligation to work. The always-on culture results in clear mental health deterioration. Research from the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine found that constant digital connectivity prevents psychological detachment necessary for recovery, increases rumination and the anxiety by 67%. It disrupts sleep architecture and circadian rhythms, and it accelerates cognitive decline in attention and memory. Dr. Gloria Mark's research at UC Irvine demonstrates that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully regain focus after each digital interruption. That's from Mark et al. 2016. With workers experiencing interruptions every 3 to 5 minutes, Genuine deep work becomes impossible, yet the responsibility to produce remains. A German study published in Computers in Human Behavior found that employees who couldn't disconnect from the work technology experienced significantly higher emotional exhaustion, work-family conflict, and decreased life satisfaction. That's from Dirks et al. 2014. Now, Priya decided to negotiate her core hours. Her employer installed work apps that blocked work communication after 7 p.m. in the evening. She initially experienced some anxiety about missing things for the first 2 weeks, but gradually that faded. Her productivity actually increased, especially during some focused work blocks, and her sleep quality improved dramatically. So now let's look at some evidence-based solutions. Let's face it, excessive responsibility results in poor mental health, but we're not powerless. Here's 5 scientifically validated strategies that we can take. Number 1, implement boundaries. Don't just rely on your willpower alone. Those boundaries need to be designated work hours. Make use of automatic email responders when you're not on duty. Separate out the work devices. Research shows that environmental design outperforms intention alone by 3 to 1 in change. That's from Thaler and Sustain, 2008. Number 2, practice delegation. Identify the tasks that can be shared or outsourced, or even eliminated. A Harvard Business School study found that executives who delegated effectively reported 23% lower stress levels and 33% higher team satisfaction. That's from Porter and Noria, 2018. Delegation multiplies capacity while reducing individual burden. Here's solution number 3. Schedule some recovery time. Recovery isn't optional, it is neurologically necessary. So block out some white space in your calendar. Give it the same priority as meetings. Research in applied psychology, an international review, shows that even brief recovery periods significantly improve resilience and performance. That's from Sonnentag and Fritz, 2007. Solution number 4, develop responsibility discernment. Not every request requires a yes. It's worth practicing distinguishing between your own responsibility and make sure that's aligned with your role and your values, your shared responsibility that can be distributed, and what is not your responsibility. In other words, it's for someone else to take on. Cognitive behavioral therapy techniques for assertiveness reduce anxiety symptoms by 40% and responsibility in overwhelmed individuals. That's from Hoffman et al., 2012. And solution number 5, build yourself a support network. Being isolated just amplifies the burden. Whether you get that through therapy or a peer support group or through some coaching or just talking to trusted friends, distributing that emotional burden is proved to be effective. Meta-analysis consistently show that social support buffers against stress-related mental health deterioration by 50 to 60%. That's from Cohen and Wills, 1985. So thank you again for watching and listening to Peace Unplugged. Until the next time, bye for now.